I wanted to start off by saying, do as I say, not as I do. Who's ever heard that before? Maybe from a parent, where it's like they're giving you some advice. Hey, I want you to do that. And you're like, but you didn't do that. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, right? Like, what do we call that? Double standard, hypocrisy, right? Well, I think our culture has a problem with hypocrisy, and it's around money. And like money's a hot topic with our culture. You know, there's all these rich folks, they seem to keep getting more and more money, and there's not enough for the rest of us, right? And then there's some people who champion like, we need to change this. Now, we live north of the 49th parallel, that's where Canada is. Below that is a country called the United States. Come on, guys, please don't fail geography in school. Y'all graduating soon. The United States, you know, where all the good shopping is. Okay, so their culture always sort of bleeds up into ours. There's no way around it. Ooh, it didn't fall though, like not all the way, so we're good. Their culture kind of bleeds into to our culture in multiple different ways. And oftentimes we hear sort of like political things coming up. And so in regards to this issue around money, there are some champions about this in the States. There's two in particular I want to talk about, Bernie Sanders and AOC. Now, who knows who Bernie is? Bernie, yeah, you know, he got really famous because of like the mittens, right? And then like the scarf thing. There's like a whole meme about that when he was at like an inauguration, right? So Bernie used to say this thing all the time. You know, we got to deal with the millionaires. They got all the money and they're not sharing it. But after a long political career, Bernie started to learn how to like do what a lot of people do and you know, gain some wealth. And all of a sudden, Bernie was a millionaire. And what did he start saying? We got to get the billionaires. Forget about the millionaires. Don't ignore me. Ignore me. I'm fine. Billionaires. Billionaires. They're the bad guys. They're the bad guys. Ignore the fact that I own 3 big, beautiful houses. Don't look at me. Look at the billionaires. Okay, there's someone else I can think of who's like a real trailblazer in politics, which is AOC. She came in out of nowhere in New York City. She has been like on all of these committees. She is doing an amazing thing, just how she has come in and just taken off in politics. Like it's almost unprecedented how like fast she's just gone and soared with so many things. And I remember once at the Met Gala, she came in, it's just like a big fancy thing at like the Met Art Gallery in New York City. So there's this big gala every year. And if you show up there, you've kind of made it, you know, usually wearing pretty fancy clothes. And she had this big white gown on. And on the back of the gown, painted in bright red paint, kind of looked like blood, it said, "Eat the rich." Ooh, spicy, right? So it's kind of like Bernie, kind of like, you know, we got to go after these people that are hoarding it all and not giving it to others. And shortly after that, this huge hurricane came through and really messed up Puerto Rico in a bad way. And that's where her abuela, where her grandmother lives. And some pictures sort of came out of her abuela's place, and it didn't look so good. It looked like a pretty rough place to live, actually. And so there was this whole thing of like her complaining and saying, hey, we got to give more, we got to do this, we got to do that. But it seemed like someone who was becoming established in politics, and people in Congress actually make a decent amount of money. More than I'll probably ever make in a year is what they make in a year, like for sure. But it didn't seem like that was going to Abuela. Now, mind you, I have grandparents too, and they don't want to accept anything from me. So that is 100% what could be the case. But from outside appearances, it kind of looks like there's some hypocrisy here. It kind of looks like there's a double standard. And so when it comes to money, when it comes to our relationship with money, we oftentimes have this tension where it's like, if I had money, I would be generous. But then when it comes, that's my money, not for you. That sort of seems to be how it goes. And a lot of people will talk about this idea of like a Marxist utopia where we're gonna distribute the wealth evenly, the world will be a better place. But in the past, when these types of ideas have been tried, what often ends up happening is it's the same problem. But instead of like the millionaires and the billionaires, it's a political elite that sort of control everything and everybody else is kind of stuck under their boot. It's the same thing because this is a human problem. This is a heart problem. This is a problem that you and I also have. And it's really, really, really difficult. But when it comes to generosity, one thing I've noticed, one thing that really sticks out to me, it's not about like trying to pick sides or being overly political. And I'm sorry if that's how it came across. Just when I thought of this, those were the first two that came to mind. They're so well established on social media. So I'm trying to be relatable with that here. So please don't take that as a political stance from me. But with this, one thing I've noticed over my life is the most generous people I know have nothing. It's the poor. Why? Why do the poor who have so little, why are they so generous? This is something Jesus even notices in the Gospel of Mark. We go to the Gospel of Mark chapter 12, verses 41 to 44. It says this: Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were being put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury, which is kind of rude. Can you imagine like Jesus following the offering bag around at church going like, oh, how much, which is kind of what was happening. And many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few pennies. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything she had to live on. Poor people understand something on a very deep level that most of us don't. It's need. And I want you to think about that word need because you have it. You have a need in your life. I have a need in my life, and it is a deep need. And we often try to fool ourselves into thinking that we don't need God, because we have. You may not feel like I have, but you live in one of the richest countries in the world, in the most advanced technological age that we're aware of that humanity has ever had. You are a have. No one tried to kill you today. You've clothes on your back. Your education's free. You're like, well, no, my college isn't free, but did you pay to go to grade school? Did you pay to go to high school? I've been places and lived with people where they had to and many couldn't afford that. So yes, your education is free. You don't look emaciated to me. Everybody here looks pretty healthy. You're a have. You're a have. But because we are haves, because our needs are never long in being met, when you're bored, you can go on TikTok. When you're hungry, Uber is there. Whatever you want, you are never long in having that want come to happen. But you might say, well, I don't know about that. You might feel needy, and I understand that, but the stuff that you want, it's not the same as the incredible everything that you have, to the point where you realize, probably not this point, which you should realize, that you need God. I need God. People who come from a place where they are constantly praying and hoping for what is to come, because if they don't get what is to come, it means they're going to be hungry, it means they're going to be cold, it means they're going to be starving, it means it's not going to be safe. Understand that they have a need and that they are not in control. We're in this series called Little Devils, and today we're talking about greed. So these little devils, we ignore them. They're so easy to sneak up on us. But there's a reason that the church called these little devils the 7 deadly sins. They are truly deadly. Not only do they lead us away from God in this life, they can destroy us now, but definitely in the next. So this is something we need to treat with great respect. There's nothing little about them. So in this idea of need, in this idea that there's this thing called greed, and there's like, we're trying to deal with that, I thought of something that a lot of evangelists have used. It's this phrase, talking about a God-sized hole. This was first came up with by a guy named Blaise Pascal, like a few hundred years ago. He was like a scientist and sort of a religious scholar. And he came up with this idea, which I think is very true, that because God created us, we have a God-sized hole because he created people to be with him. And if you've been coming to Archetype for a while, you've probably heard about this thing called the fall, where in the Garden of Eden, humanity chose to rebel against God, make their own way, and head in that direction away from him. And we have been doing it ever since. And if you look around the chaos of the world around us right now, it's not going so well, is it? God has endlessly pursued us, and we have endlessly pursued anything but God in our desire to fill that God-sized hole in us. And into that society pours its worst desires, its worst hopes, its worst dreams, its worst vices. And we do this over and over in the hope of feeling whole. We distract ourselves by seeking experience, stimulation, stuff, scrolling on reels, all sorts of things. But in the end, greed and the need to fill this with stuff doesn't work. You will always need more. You will always want more, have to have more. Greed is a lie. And the lie is this, that if I only have more, I'll be happy. I'll be happy. And that's something we all chase. And we live in a time where there is an incredible amount of unhappiness. This is probably one of the highest times in history that mental health has been as poor as it is. And I don't know about you, but I felt really sad today calling out to God, going, why don't I feel as happy as I should? What's going on? In this endless cycle of need and greed, we can become like a dog chasing his own tail. Does it ever feel like you're just going in circles, getting absolutely nowhere, no matter how much you put into that? Our confusion and denial of need tricks us into thinking that we have gained some kind of independence. If I have this wealth and health and power, I don't need God. I can make my own way, decide my own life, do what I want. Because I do not need God. You may not say it, but is there a part of you that believes that to be true? Like looking at your actions, not just what you say. Right? Because people, we were talking about earlier, people talk a good game, but in the actions, the things you do, the things that speak to the truth of what's happening inside you, is it true in your heart? Our chase after money to fill and fulfill is false. And it's not just Christians that know this. Jim Carrey knows this. He's got this great quote about this. He says, I think everybody should get rich, be famous, and do everything they ever dreamed of so they know that it's not the answer. Jesus understood how big this lie of greed was and is. So much so that it's no coincidence that about a third of all of the parables in the New Testament that Jesus taught are about money. This is the truth behind greed. Greed is a symptom of a need that only God can fill. Now, if you're filling in your notes, that's the big idea. It's on the back of the paper. I'm going to say it again at the end, but I just want to get it out now. Greed is a symptom of a need only God can fill. Jesus put it like this. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The cost of the lie of greed is, if that's what you want to serve, you are not serving somebody else, even if you claim to be. If your whole hustle and your whole focus on life is more, because you're going to fill that hole, and that's how you're going to fill that hole. The cost of that is, it's beyond explanation how big that cost actually is. Paul spoke to Timothy about this. He was a young leader that Paul was mentoring. Paul was one of the apostles who served Jesus. He said this to Timothy about 2,000 years ago in 1 Timothy 6:6, verses 7 to 10. It says, we brought forth nothing into the world, and we take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and have pierced themselves with many griefs. Paul does not mince words on this. He is very direct. And in my life, I can think of lots of people. I grew up in this church. I sat in these chairs, both here and upstairs. I have been at Broadway a long time, and I can think of a lot of people I knew growing up who fell for this trap, who fell for this lie, who are not with God. There are many people who I met later in life who were Christians, who were pastors' kids, who grew up in the church and seemingly loved God, but the desire for more was misplaced for the more they were after, and they are not with God. As it said in verse 9, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. I don't know if you guys follow the news a lot. Who's ever heard of FTX before? That's been in the news a lot. Okay, like one person. Who knows what cryptocurrency is? All right, it's fake money. Say it with me. Fake money. Say it louder. You're going to be bankrupt. Fake money. Good. Remember, it's fake money, okay? So FTX is kind of like a brokerage for trading cryptocurrency. Kind of like there's brokerages around the world for trading stocks, like parts of a company. So it's a place where you could trade nothing for money. It's a great idea. So what happened is this FTX company was very good at getting people to come in and invest. And what happened was they were spending money that they didn't belong to them, that belonged to other people. And what happened very quickly, was this company that was worth well over $30 billion in the course of 7 days became worth nothing. And all of those people's money was lost. It's not coming back, it's gone. It created a huge ding. You know how the world's suffering right now in a lot of ways economically? This was not good for that. The people there were greedy and wanted more, didn't care how their actions could affect other people, and just went for it. Likewise, people who often invest in crypto, which is not a sure thing, no matter what your friend at school who's got the nice new Jordans tells you, it's not a sure thing. But people would so quickly gamble with that, and there have been several crypto crashes since crypto became a thing, and a lot of people have lost everything. There are people that lose more than just wealth. They lose something far more important. Dignity, respect. They sacrifice their values, their principles. There's a lot of beautiful people in the world, a lot of beautiful young women, and a lot of them are tired of working at Walmart, selling clothes, retail, hustling fast food. And a lot of them have joined this thing called OnlyFans, which makes everybody uncomfortable and blush. Even in this light, I can see your red faces. And most of them don't make it, by the way. But they do things they thought they never would with people they don't know, or people they said they would never do that with, in front of a camera for the hope of making a buck, of getting the algorithm to like what they have, to put it on the front page so people click on it, and their fans spend money or whatever. And they sacrifice their principles, their dignity, and put things out there that once they're out there can't come back. If we've learned anything about the internet, it's that it's forever. Because they wanted more. Not only that, that's a sin. We're going to be talking about that later. It's called lust. And not only is that damaging to the people participating in it, but the people who are also addicted to that, seeking it out. It's not just damaging to them, it's damaging to everyone. Maybe you guys have heard of a horrible person called Andrew Tate. Okay, controversial figure. Some people love him, some people hate him. You want to know one of the things he likes to go on and on about? About how dudes can get their SOs, their significant others, to pimp themselves out on OnlyFans so they can make money. How awful is that? It's friggin' disgusting. Not only that, there's a ton of other ridiculous, horrific things that guy says. And right now he's being investigated for the second time under suspicion of human trafficking for all kinds of awful nonsense. Someone, again, in the pursuit of more, willing to sacrifice values and others besides themselves, doing all kinds of things that are awful. This seems to be a pretty straight-laced group. This youth group over the years, I'm old, I've been here a long time, has gone through phases. And sometimes we've had some pretty hard people in here, people who were very involved with the gang life. And there's a lot of money in the gang life. There's a lot of glory in the gang life. There's a lot of crime, sadness, pain, hurt, death, and brokenness as well. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And it's easy for you to get caught up in it, influenced by the influencers, whether they're at your school or online, whether they're coming at you through your phone or across the lunch table. People who are willing to grow their audience for that next life, no matter the cost of their integrity or the compromise to their character. The truth is, if cash is king, in serving that king, Jesus isn't yours. If cash is king, you will do everything to get cash, which means throwing Jesus under the bus in your life, in practically living out what you say or claim you believe. And don't get me confused here. I'm not ripping on rich people. You can be rich and love Jesus, and you can be poor and love money. Your socioeconomic status does not determine your destination in regards to heaven. It doesn't. No one can serve two masters. There's no way to do it. As I look at you guys here, I've been seeing you for a long time, one thing I notice regularly is that you're getting grown. You're older. You're hopefully wiser, smarter, stronger, more prepared, and you're getting ready for the rest of your life. And you're looking to people. Who am I going to be? How am I going to get there? And like the smart people that you are, you're looking at other people who maybe have some things that you want. Like, how can I be like that person? How can I get to where they got? What color is your Bugatti? I couldn't help myself. But seriously. But maybe you're here and you're saying, look, I understand what you're saying, but to be honest, greed isn't my thing. You know, there's of the 7 deadly sins, there's 6 other ones, and trust me, I'm pretty bad with those. Greed isn't mine. Let's just keep going. Okay, I hear what you're saying. But just because you may not be chasing money does not mean that you are not greedy. It doesn't. We talked earlier about this God-sized hole. If God isn't in that place in your heart, your nature is to fill it. You will find a way because it is unbearable to leave it empty. And no matter how hard we try, when we think we found the limits of it, it ends up being bigger than we thought, deeper than we thought, wider than we thought, and we keep pushing and doing. So let's say for you, it is one of the other 7 deadly sins, but let's not give up on greed yet, because there might be ways that you are greedy and you're not aware of it. Maybe you're hogging, withholding from others, denying those things to people they need because there's something you feel that you need more. And we often go, well, actually, Jason, seriously, that's not me, because we go to a very unrelatable place. With greed, there is relatable and unrelatable. When we go to unrelatable, we go to the millionaires and the billionaires, the big shots and the haves. We think of people like the oil sheiks in Saudi Arabia who hide their money and are actually worth trillions of dollars. Maybe the banking monopoly in Canada, where there's like 5 banks that control our entire financial system. Maybe it's the big 3 cell phone companies. That's why your cell phone bill is so expensive. In Canada is the most expensive place for cellular service in the world because those companies decided, hey, we're going to keep our rates kind of in line with each other. So that way we can keep jacking up the prices and people are stuck. I hope to God it's not cartels dealing with human trafficking drugs. Also avocados and limes, I learned the other day. They're like in the grocery game now. And it's like where they're making most of their money. I'm not joking. Like avocados and limes. When you go to Superstore and you buy those, you know what you're doing. But maybe it's relatable. Maybe it's really relatable. Maybe it's your time. You have no time for God. It's my time. I work hard. I go to school. I'm going to do what I want. It's for me. It's not for anybody else. I'm not going to give time to that person who's alone or needs help. I'm not going to sacrifice my social credit by going and being with that person. No. That will affect me. And I can't have that. Maybe it's money. You know, we work hard for money. Maybe you already have a job and you're learning how to be independent, which isn't a bad thing. But now that you have that, you're starting to feel kind of proud and full of yourself, and you have that money, and you go, yeah, you know, there's food waiting for me at home. I had food here. I'm full, but I'm gonna treat myself, and I'm gonna spend all my money on this thing that I like, and I'm gonna have that. But you pass that same homeless person every day, and you could easily give them your favorite meal or hand them that 20, and you don't. As much as we like to say it's the millionaires and the billionaires, there is relatable greed. And we all participate in it. I used to be a part of this thing called Celebrate Recovery. It's a place for hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And I was there first as like a patient. I was there because I needed help. And eventually, as I got better and grew, I got to become a leader and help others through similar things that I went through. And one of the things that people love to lie to themselves about is saying, I'm going to stop so I'm fine. I'm going to stop. That's it. I just need to stop. That's all I need to do. I can just stop being greedy. That's fine. But it doesn't work. Because whether it's greed or one of the other 6, we use it to fill that God-sized hole, that God-sized need in your heart. And just because you've stopped filling it with like the pursuit of greed doesn't mean that it isn't there and it's open like a wound needing to be put back together. So how do we do this? My greedy friends, how do we deal with this? Well, I've got good news. Paul, that guy that wrote this thing 2,000 years ago, was actually pretty on it and understood today pretty well, even though he didn't know when today was coming. He gave more words to Timothy, not just about this idea of need, this idea of being careful in pursuing that, but actually how do you live a life that's opposite of greed? As we continue on to 1 Timothy chapter 6, it says this, command those who are rich in the present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. In the same way, lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So in your outlines, you have 3 things. Those are the 3 do's. Before that, I'm going to tell you a couple don'ts. There's 2 things you shouldn't, 2 things don't do this, and the rest are the things you need to do. First one is don't put your trust in wealth. It's shaky. It doesn't last. You may think it lasts, but like most families that get to the place of being among the millionaires and the billionaires, they are lucky if that lasts to the 3rd generation, but it's definitely gone by the 4th. Very few families hang on to wealth. It's there and it's gone. Which goes to the second thing, don't be arrogant because you have. None of this is sure, guys. Like, I've got a pretty big family. Like, there's a lot of people I'm related to in BC, in Germany, Argentina, and other places around the world. And I can't get into too many specifics with this. But I have family in some places where there's some pretty awful corruption going on right now. And they are in a place of want and severe pain. And these are God-fearing, God-loving people who put their trust in God, not wealth. But basically, they have no ability to access their wealth for a variety of reasons. Most of it having to be corruption and greed. Because of that, people have to get them money, which involves multiple people in multiple countries working really hard to make sure they have enough money for food and medical help, which they need. It's not a sure thing. And if you knew what their business was and how that was going beforehand, which is perfectly legal and fine, but for safety's sake, I can't get into too many details with that, like, you would never think that these people would be in want. Like established wealth, if you want to use that term. But their faith and their trust is in God. And thank God that God is providing for them. So let's go to the 3 do's. Okay, number 1 is this. Acknowledge the God-sized hole. You can't fix what you say isn't there. Acknowledge the God-sized hole, the God-sized need in your life. And it's bigger than anything the world can give you. It's bigger than anything the world has. You need to trust that God will provide for your needs. But not only that, what it says here in verse 17 is that he'll provide everything for our enjoyment. God cares about you and your happiness. Not just what you need, but enough to enjoy life. When's the last time you heard a Christian talking about that from a pastor up on stage? God wants you to enjoy life. And oftentimes we talk about how you got to buckle down, grit your teeth, and love God, and it is what it is. But God actually wants you to enjoy your life. He cares deeply. And trust that the person who created that God-sized hole in your heart knows how to fill it. The second thing is this: be rich in good deeds. Be rich in good deeds. Jesus said this: do not store up for yourselves treasures here on earth where moth and rust and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth, vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This isn't forever. Paul talks about like the idea of those that are rich being not focused on their wealth, but being rich in good deeds and in sacrifice, because that's going to the next life, the life with God, the life that is actually forever, the life that is actually life, as Paul described it. This is a passing moment. This is like dumping all your money into Clash of Clans or some other dumb cell phone game, hoping that you're going to take that into the real world and it's worth nothing. And that's what we so often do with our lives. Denzel Washington says this: you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. If you don't know what a hearse is, it's that sort of like limo with like a lot of junk in the trunk, but that junk's a dead person, right? And they're going to the graveyard where they're going to drop that box down. Like there isn't a bunch of moving vans following that. It's not full of someone's wealth. And if you were an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, yes, but all those tombs are empty. And the bodies are desecrated. And the tombs that they found that were full, they emptied them and put them in museums. So like, you don't take it with you. But we treat it like it's so important. The third one is this, and this is not a popular statement. It's not your money. It isn't. God created everything, right? Can we agree that? Like, do we feel like God created everything? Yes? No? Maybe? Well, if that is what we believe and it's true, that God created everything, everything belongs to him. All of it, including you. If everything belongs to God, it definitely isn't yours. So as a church, one of the things we do to help remind ourselves that we help ourselves fight greed is we give what we have back to God. Thank you. Take it back. We trust him. We don't take what he has and go, oh, it's mine. Thank you. You want it back? No. You got more paper. You're God. This is my paper. No. God wants us to give back to him, to trust him enough to let go of what we have and say, I trust that you will provide. It says this in Acts 20:35. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And as someone who has received a lot and given some, giving's way better. Giving is so much better. When you can be a part of a blessing in someone's life, that is one of the best things that can be a part of your life. Yes, the reward is in heaven, but it's also in that moment because I feel like God shares that joy with the giver. You did good. And one thing, even though Christians are often quiet in how we give because God tells us not to be boastful and to do things just so people look at us, the world still notices what the church does. So you might wonder, okay, well, why should I give? If you all this idea of like, being generous and giving, but doesn't the church just take and hoard money? Like, don't all the pastors drive like really fancy cars and all this other stuff? I don't know if you've seen my or Nathan's car, but they have 4 wheels. They start sometimes. The engines make noise. We're good. It's fine. Right? Yes, some pastors after a long career eventually make some money. But here's the truth about what the church does with its money is it gives it to places like the building you're in right now. We're in the City Reach Care Society. Our church founded this place because they wanted to be able to give back to a city that doesn't like Christians. So they needed to make a place that was somewhat removed from the church where the people in need would actually be willing to take the hand that was being stretched out to them. There is an incredible amount of money that moves through here in food, in services to people that are in need, the most marginalized people in society, every day. It's awesome. Before COVID, there were like maybe a couple hundred people that came here to our food bank, and now it's like we're getting into the thousands. You know that this was at one point one of the like the number one food bank in Canada? It's kind of amazing. The world takes notice of that. There's a Canadian think tank, okay? It's a nonpartisan think tank. Their focus is to try and figure out how can we use politics to make Canada better. So nonpartisan means they're not liberal, they're not conservative, they're not NDP. Their goal is just the numbers. What's the best thing we can do to make our country better? This think tank's called Cardus. And they've been doing a lot of study on religious people giving money. And when you give money to a charity, you get a tax break, right? Because the government says, okay, a certain percentage of that, we're not going to tax you as your money because you are giving back to the community. We're going to value that. Do you know what they found? That the value of the money given is 12 times more than the tax break the government gives. That's a crazy, growing of what that is. Do you know that of religious organizations in Canada, that the total value of what's being given, if you would compare that to what Canada spends on healthcare across the whole country, like every city, every province, the federal government combined, it's basically 25%. That's the value. And also, by the way, Canada's not a very religious place. There aren't a lot of people that regularly go to a religious gathering. And those are the people that give. The ones that regularly go. And of those, not as many as you think. And that difference is something that is so big and impactful in our country, it actually is picked up by these places trying to figure out how can we make Canada better. We should support churches, turns out. In the United States, the WMU, Journal of Society and Welfare, this is Western Michigan University, they were studying specifically churches. Do Christians give more or less when times are tough? Turns out they give more. As the United States was going through a lot of really tough economic stuff, the study only went till 2019, but they were looking at stuff from the early 2000s to 2008 where there was a huge crash. A lot of people lost their houses and became homeless. That giving actually increased 300%. That people who were in the middle of feeling that pain and that hurt and that strife were like, I am going to give 3 times more than I was already giving. Because if I'm hurting, other people are hurting, and I trust God. Greed is a symptom of a need only God can fill. When God fills that need, your life changes. You are so full and overflowing in his grace, in his love, and in his mercy that what he has given you, this paper we're trying to hoard, becomes something you're just so happy to give, to let go of, to know that, yes, it all belongs to God and he's got me and it's fine. And your life will be better for it. I used to work for some very rich people. My dad and I worked for my dad. He was a property manager in this really wealthy home in Vancouver. The people who owned that house at one point were worth $63 billion. If you ever are doing any sort of internet stuff or that's going between us and China, they own the cable that goes between China and here on the ground with the really fast internet. Very wealthy. The most miserable people I've ever met in my life. I'm not joking. They didn't need or want anything. They had everything, but they had nothing. I have never seen a family that fought like that hated each other like that stabbed each other in the back like that it's beyond what I can say on this from this pulpit. Greed is a symptom of a need only God can fill. What about you? Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. We're going to ask the band to come back up. What about you? What do your actions say? Do you practice what you preach as a Christian? Do you understand what God has given you? Are you happy with that? Are you happy with the salvation which was bought at a price? You were bought at a price. That everything you have belongs to God. And are you living that out? Or is greed taking hold of you? Is the desire and the want for things you don't have and hope to have taking over your life? You're obsessed. You can't let go. Do you feel empty all the time? Maybe greed has come into your life, the weed and the lie that it is, and it is spreading in and it is clouding your vision and your judgment. If you're here today and you're a Christian and that's you, just pop up your hand. No one's looking around. All the eyes are closed. No one's looking anywhere. Maybe you need to let go of some things in your life. There's things in your life that have taken the place of God and your obsession over them. Okay. And maybe you're here and you are not yet a Christian. Maybe you're here and you understand that hustle and that desire for more, and you want to chase after it no matter the cost, but in your pursuit of that, you are not finding the joy you thought was going to be there. And you believe the lie that if you keep going far enough, once I get the next thing, I'll have it. Once I get the next thing, I'll have it. Once I get for sure this time. There's a God-sized hole in your heart that only he can fill. Will you accept him into your heart?